I think it wouldn't be an overstatement to say that I'd break up with my wife just so I could remarry Callisto Protocol, a game developed by the original creators of Dead Space, the game that so perfectly balances on that impossible line of being so fun and exciting, but at the same time so absolutely terrifying. This atmosphere of being locked on the spaceship in the middle of an empty cosmos, together with unimaginable horrors straight from the Lovecraftian stories, is something that I don't think any other game managed to ever capture. Dead Spaces were the ideal continuation of the survival horror genre that Resident Evil started in some old boomer times. You had to manage your limited resources, converse through the tight corridors where danger could be anywhere, and of course watch some of the gruesomest death animations that are still one of the best, if not the best, that games have ever had. Dead Space was an experience that made you want more of that perfect combination of tension, pure body horror, and the exhilarating action, which altogether merged into what felt like a completely new genre. Every single element of Dead Space is so meticulously put together that you don't even think about how hard it must have been to balance it all together. I mean, you do think about all that, but you think about it in Dead Space 3, because it has none of that magic that the original two games had. And it's not a bad game, it's just... well, it's a co-op game that is focused on horror, where you try to uncover dark mysteries of some forgotten alien species, while at the same time being involved in almost nonsensical melodrama, and where you can buy loot boxes with real money. So yeah, the focus in this one is, how do I put it? Absolutely fucked. But hey, being abused by your boss until you completely burn out and quit is just one of the perks of working in game industry. It also gets so much more fun if you're a woman. But just like a necromorph that appeared to be totally dead just a second ago, Dead Space somehow managed to rise from the dead and give us exactly what we all wanted. Dead Space 3, but actually good this time. From the very limited things that we've seen thus far, it looks like Callisto Protocol ticks all of the boxes that we want from it. The body horror is still here, the claustrophobic industrial corridors where death can await you at any corner, the combat that allows you to relive your wildest dreams of being an absolute psycho, and even the signature "holy shit, did he really just do that to me?" that you'll say after being brutally mauled by another spawn of Satan. And of course it's still too early to judge how the game will turn out to be. The early showings always have a tendency to completely lie about what will we get in 4 years when the game went through an absolute bottoms of development hell, during which the whole project was restarted like 2 times, and the whole game was remade from the very scratch, and it's so far from the original vision right now that it as well might be called a completely different game at this point, but it's been so long and you are so tired and endlessly exhausted that you just want it all to finally end, and to spend some time with the family whom you ignored for all those long and soul-crushing years. So, we never know if the game will turn out to be good or not before we finally have our hands on it. However, I'm optimistic, because we've seen what these people can do, and we just want them to do exactly the same thing that they already did in the past. Just more of the same thing. I mean, now when I think about it, it's funny how the most exciting things from this year's Totally Not E3 are either the sequels to already massively popular franchises or remakes of the games that we already played. And it's not like there are no new original games these days. There are so many exciting, fresh projects that are made by teams of all sizes and experiences, but it's just that we don't care about any of that at all. We don't need originality and creativity. We want nostalgia. We want something that we already had, just with a slightly new coat of paint all over it. Something familiar and not too far out from our comfort zone. Something that would remind us of better times. Futurism was a movement which originated in Italy and also Russia in the early 20th century. The main difference which separated it from any other movement before was its borderline obsession on progress and every single aspect of it. Futurism rejected the past together with its norms and rules. Instead of following the traditions, it rejected them. Futurist paintings were filled with bizarre, unorthodox styles and techniques. Its poetry was all about experimentation and dismissal of commonly accepted forms, and its philosophy praised the future which humanity can achieve with the help of modern technologies. This movement was a response to the rapidly changing world that the inhabitants of the early 20th century had found themselves in. The technological revolution was changing every single aspect of life, and so people stopped looking into the past for its lessons and guidance, but instead directed their gazes into the future, with all of the excitement that it may bring. But we know that the future of 20th century was anything except exciting. After experiencing the worst conflict in the history of humankind, and then reliving it all over again just a couple of decades later, the faith in the bright and hopeful future became a relic of better, less chaotic times. Instead of looking forward to what comes next, people were trapped in the lingering horrors of modern full-scale warfare, and even the trust in technologies, with all of the utopias that they may bring, was replaced by the petrifying realization of all of the destruction that those same technologies can cause. Still, the era of 50s and 60s is considered to be the golden age of science fiction. During this time period, it became the massive cultural pillar that it still is today. And it may seem strange at a first glance. If people were really that traumatized by technologies and hopeless about what will the future bring, then why science fiction became so popular? Well, it's because sci-fi gave a desired escape from the dreadful realities. Fiction of this period was very much about distant planets, fantastical aliens, and coming all together as a species to transcend into something better than what we are. These stories weren't really about any science behind the inventions which would change our life forever, but rather they were about the dreams of better societies and simple answers to the questions that became so omnipresent after World War II. Of course, not all fiction was like that. Some, instead of using cosmos as a tool of escapism, choose to focus on desperation and deeply pessimistic mood that prevailed during these times. Novels like A Clockwork Orange or 1984 were a great indicator of how just in few decades the cheerful vision of the future was crushed by reality, and instead people started to dread of what might come tomorrow. So what was the point of this introduction to history of art, course 1, lesson 1? Well, now I hope you understand how the environment of our very real, very physical world influences what art and, fast forward to today, what media we consume. Our economic, political and social situation molds us and in a way dictates what stories and experiences we seek out. So that is partly why Marvel films are so popular and why we face this never-ending stream of remakes, remasters and sequels. It's not only because it's easier for the massive mega corporations to produce relatively unchanged experiences every single year, but it's also because we keep constantly consuming and looking for exactly this type of content. We don't want the risk of novelty, we want familiarity. A well-produced thing that won't blow our minds, but which at the same time is predictable and thus safe, is what we prefer to the new and potentially uncertain alternative. Before the 1920s, people were celebrating because the world seemed without limits, so they could look into a future which was filled with hopes and dreams. Then in the 60s, the failings of humanity made people want to escape into the distant and fantastical cosmos. And in the new 20s, we just want certainty and stability. The world in which we ended up is, scientifically speaking, absolutely fucking bonkers. With the inflation rates eating up any savings that you may have for the future, the housing market where the majority of young adults are coming to terms with actually never owning their own home, and the dread of total crash looming over all of us, there is no part of life where anyone can feel safe anymore. And that is even if we don't take into consideration the devastating effects of COVID and the geopolitical situation that feels more and more like a powder keg with every single day. Add to that the crisis of mental health that has been on rise even before the pandemic, and we get the picture of why so many people today feel not only apathetic, but even fearful of what's to come. So I think it's fair to say that a lot of us just want to escape from this hellhole for like at least a couple of next years. And oh, would you look at that? It's funny how many space-themed games we had during this year's game shows. I guess it's just completely unrelated to the growing lack of faith in today, which makes us move more and more into the worlds of fiction, where there is at least some resemblance of sense to it all. I mean, it's not like that ever happened before, but more than that, the lack of our openness to novel ideas in what we consume can also show how we cling to familiarity simply because that is what gives us comfort now. It's like a coping mechanism. We demand safety in our media as a result of feeling unsafe in every other aspect of our lives. In a time of great discomfort, it is pretty common to return to things which remind us of simpler, less fucked up times. We all know that a new Skyrim game won't bring back the times when we didn't have to struggle to pay the rent and think about total nuclear annihilation. But maybe, just for a short, tiny brief moment, it will numb the pain of the never-ending void that we have to look into every single day. And that is why I can't wait to finally get my hands on Callisto Protocol. I think that finally going back to the formula of Dead Space that we all loved so much will be so much fun. I can't wait for necromorphs, gruesome kill cams, dismembering the abominations from the outer space, the kick-ass action, the supreme spooky atmosphere, the grim industrial corridors, and just that unique package that only the people who did the original Dead Space can deliver to us. I do think that Callisto Protocol will be the highlight of this year, and it will be just freaking awesome.